Have you ever stopped to wonder if the thoughts in your head are just really yours? I mean, truly yours. Not borrowed from social media, not parroted from a book or copied from your favorite podcast. For years, I've struggled with this. I've read something inspiring to hear someone articulate it in an idea beautifully, and then I think, wow, I want to think like that. But when it came to be putting my own thoughts into words, it felt recycled. If you've ever felt this way, hey, welcome to the club. The world isn't exactly set up to encourage original thinking. We're conditioned at a young age to fit into a neat little box, regulate information from tests, and blend into the expectations of society. Breaking free from that mold, it's not easy, but it's necessary if you want to carve your own path. Let's talk about how to make that leap from simply consuming to genuinely creating something original. Why thinking for yourself feels so hard. Thinking for yourself feels like an uphill battle because it goes against how most of us were conditioned from the start. Society, education, and even our families train us to conform, not to question. Think back to your school days. Were you encouraged to explore your own ideas, or were you graded on how well you memorized somebody else's? The latter is true for most people. We're taught to value the right answers over the journey of discovering those answers for ourselves. That approach, while efficient for standardized testing, doesn't often leave us much room for creativity or independent thought. Over time, it wires us to follow rather than lead in our own thinking. Beyond that, we live in a world dominated by social media and algorithms, which enforce the echo chamber effect. Algorithms are brilliant at feeding us what we already believe and keeping us comfortable in those beliefs. But if you've ever noticed that your newsfeed at times just feels like an endless loop of ideas you already agree with, you're not alone. And that's by design. But when you're only exposed to familiar perspectives, you're less likely to challenge them. Thinking for yourself requires stepping out of this comfort zone, something the digital age doesn't naturally encourage. There's also the psychological aspect. Thinking independently can feel isolating and even risky. As humans, we have this natural desire to belong, and questioning widely accepted beliefs can often sometimes make you feel like the odd one out. It's safer, it's much easier to go with the flow and align with what's already popular. From childhood, we're subtly taught that fitting in is more valuable than standing out, which can make the idea of stepping away from the crowd intimidating. After all, who wants to take a risk at being misunderstood or criticized? Finally, let's not overlook the sheer effort it takes to think critically. It's exhausting. Thinking for yourself means analyzing the information you consume, questioning its validity, and then forming your own conclusion. That's a lot of work in a world where convenience is king. It's tempting to take shortcuts and adopt the opinions of others, especially when they seem so smart or successful. But originally doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from doing the hard work of peeling back the layers, digging deeper, and finding what truly resonates with you. That's why it's so rare and rewarding when people embrace the challenges. The turning point, from mimicry to authenticity. For many of us, the journey from mimicry to authenticity begins with frustration. It's that nagging feeling that something is off. Even though you can't quite put your finger on it, you're reading all the right books, following all the thought leaders, and then consuming all the how-to guides. But instead of feeling inspired, you feel stuck. And that was me for years. I'd read something brilliant and immediately think, why didn't I think of that? My natural response was to try mimicking their style, their voice, and their ideas. But the more I tried, the more it felt like I was wearing somebody else's clothes that didn't quite fit. The turning point for me came when I realized that mimicry wasn't a sustainable path. It's fine as a starting point. After all, we learn by emulating others, but it can't be the destination. There comes a time when you have to let go of the safety net and ask, what do I truly think? And that question can be terrifying because it forces you to confront the possibility that your voice might not be fully formed. But it's also liberating. When you stop trying to copy others, you give yourself the freedom to experiment and fail, and most importantly, to discover what makes your perspective unique. I saw this shift most clearly when I started building Blakebill. So in the beginning, I looked at other platforms and thought, how can I replicate what's already working? But that mindset didn't last long because I quickly realized that mimicking others wasn't solving the problems that I wanted to address. Freelancers and creatives didn't just need another file sharing platform or another invoicing way to invoice their clients. They needed a way to combine both to streamline their workflow and then just get paid immediately. And so that realization forced me to stop copying and start creating from a place of authenticity. Blakebill wasn't about following a template. It was about solving a problem in the way that only I could. Stepping into authenticity isn't just a one-time decision. It's an ongoing process. So even now, I catch myself slipping back into mimicry when I try to consume too much content or compare myself to others. The key is to stay aware and remember that authenticity isn't about perfection. It's about intention. It's about being honest with yourself and trusting that your unique perspective has value, even if it doesn't look or sound like anybody else's. Here's the beautiful part. When you stop trying to fit into somebody else's mold, you not only free yourself, but you also give others the permission to do the same. And that's the real power of authenticity. So let's just go on a few steps about how to approach this. Step 1, start questioning everything. If you want to think originally, you have to get comfortable with questioning everything. Your beliefs, your assumptions, and even the way you've always done things. I mean, everything. Let's say you've always believed that sex means grinding 12-hour days for a corporate job. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why? What benefits you have from believing this? Is it even true? You see, when I started working for myself, I had to unlearn all of these ideas, all about what real business looked like. I thought I needed a fancy office, a big team, and a lot of overhead. But the more I questioned these assumptions, the more I realized I could have done something more lean and effective, like Blakebill, without all the fluff. Step 2, embrace the messiness of originality. Originality isn't clean or straightforward, it's messy. It's trying out an idea, realizing it sucks, and starting over. It's connecting two seemingly unrelated dots and then seeing what happens. So remember, Blakebill wasn't fully formed when I started it. In the beginning, it was just an idea that was simple, just a way to transfer files. But again, as I got feedback, I realized that people were frustrated about chasing payments too. And that's when the magic actually happened. I combined the two. Now, freelancers and creatives can send files and get paid instantly. Problem solved. The point is, don't be afraid to let your ideas evolve. Give them space to breathe. Sometimes the best solution comes from the mess. Step 3, balance consumption and creation. I'll be honest, I used to think that reading more books or listening to more podcasts would automatically make me feel smarter. And guess what? It doesn't. Knowledge is useless if you don't do anything with it at all. So here's the rule I live by. For every hour I spend consuming, I gotta spend an hour creating. But that might mean writing, brainstorming, or working on something tangible. It's about taking what I've learned and turning it into something completely mine. For example, instead of just absorbing advice from productivity, I applied it to how I had managed Blakebill. I streamlined the workflow and automated the process, and then focused on what really mattered, was delivering value to my users. And that's how you bridge the gap between theory and action. Step 4, get comfortable with silence. This one's tough in our hyper-connected world, but if you want to think for yourself, you need actually time to think. Real thinking doesn't happen in the chaos of notifications and noise. It happens in the quiet moments when you're on a walk, staring out the window, or just sitting with your thoughts. So some of my best ideas in Blakebill actually came from these quiet moments. I'd step away from the screen, I'd let my mind wander, and then suddenly the solution would just click. It's not magic. It's just giving your brain the space it needs to process. Step 5, surround yourself with the right people. You've probably heard the saying, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and that's actually true. If you surround yourself with people who challenge your thinking and start pushing you to grow, you'll naturally start thinking more critically and creatively. I made it a point to connect with other entrepreneurs, like their insights, their feedback, and their challenges helped me refine my ideas. They didn't just tell me what I wanted to hear, they actually made me think. Step 6, accept that not everybody's gonna get it. Here's a really harsh truth. When you start thinking for yourself, not everyone's going to agree with you. Some people are going to criticize, others will just flat out ignore you. And that's okay. So when I was starting out, I had so many skeptics. Some were like, why not just use Dropbox? Or why not just use Google Drive and PayPal? But I knew I was solving a unique problem. I stuck to my vision, and over time, the results spoke for themselves. Step 7, keep experimenting. Original thinking isn't just a one and done deal. It's an ongoing process of questioning, exploring, and experimenting. You're never done being original. There's always more to learn, more to create, and more to discover. Even now, I'm constantly looking for ways to improve on Blakebill, like how can I make it more faster? How can I make it even more secure, more user-friendly? It's not about being perfect, it's about being curious and committed to the growth. Closing thoughts, trusting yourself. At the core of original thinking and creativity lies one simple truth. You have to trust yourself. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But in practice, it can be one of the hardest things to do. We live in a world where validation often comes from outside likes, shares, comments, approvals from peers and mentors. It's no wonder so many of us second guess our instincts. But again, here's the thing. If you don't trust yourself, you'll never trust your ideas truly. You'll always be looking for someone else to validate them. And in doing so, you risk diluting the very originality you were striving for. Trusting yourself doesn't mean ignoring feedback or never doubting your ideas. It's about believing in your ability to figure things out, even when the path ahead isn't clear. When I first started doing Blakebill, there was so many moments of doubt. People would question the concept, they would suggest tweaks that didn't align with my vision. It was tempting to cave, to try and just please everyone. But again, deep down, I knew the core of what I had was solid. Trusting myself meant staying true to my vision, and it felt very, very risky. You know what? And over time, the results proved that following my instincts was the right move. Learning to trust yourself also requires being okay with failure. Not every idea you pursue will be a winner, and that's totally okay. Original thinkers understand that failure is the opposite of success. It's a part of the process. Each misstep teaches you something valuable, something you can apply to your next attempt. When you trust yourself, you stop viewing failure as a reflection of your self-worth, and you actually start seeing it as a stepping stone. That shift in perspective allows you to keep going even when things get tough. Another important aspect of self-trust is learning to drown out the noise. The world is loud, full of opinions, advice, and people telling you what you should do. It's important to stay open to new perspectives, because there comes a point where you're going to have to tune it all out and then listen to your inner voice. That voice knows better than anybody else. It understands your values, your experiences, and the unique way you see the world. Trusting yourself means giving that voice to speak, and more importantly, the courage to finally be heard. Finally, remember that trusting yourself is a skill, not an innate trait. It's something you build over time, one decision at a time. Start small. Trust yourself to make the choice about your day, your work, and your relationships without seeking approval. Each time you follow through, you'll strengthen your confidence and your ability to navigate life on your terms. Over time, this self-trust becomes the foundation, not just for original thinking, but for living authentically. And that, more than anything else, is what you're going to set yourself apart in a world that desperately needs people who aren't afraid to think for themselves.